Welcome back to another space news update with action from ULA's Delta IV Heavy. The second European service module is handed to NASA for Artemis 2. ESA prospective astronaut and former Paralympian John McFall begins his training, plus a sneaky progress update from Saxavord. So stick around and let's get going.
Alright, liftoff and the clock has started.
So, after a jam-packed week last time out, things got off to a roaring start with the penultimate launch of the most metal rocket ever built. Yes, of course, I'm talking about ULA's Delta IV Heavy. The second to last flight of this behemoth took place last Thursday, the 22nd of June, from pad 37B at Cape Canaveral in Florida. Lifting off at 5:18 local time, this was the 15th flight of the Delta IV Heavy, carrying the NROL 68 satellite for the US government's National Reconnaissance Office. As is standard with NRO launches, no official details have been released about the payload, but after a weather delay of about 90 minutes due to storms in the Florida Space Coast area, and a scrub the previous day, we were treated to an ever-inspiring flamey spectacle. It's not called the most metal rocket for nothing, just look at the way it sets itself on fire as the engines roar to life. Seriously, what's more metal than setting yourself on fire during a performance? Lifting off into the darkness of a Florida morning, we got incredible footage of those three RS-68 engines powering over 730,000 kilograms skywards, producing a shade over 2 million pounds of thrust. Interestingly, the Delta IV Heavy uses 3 common liquid booster cores as part of its makeup, rather than a center core with solid rocket boosters. The Delta IV Heavy is the third most powerful super heavy lifter in the world, behind NASA's SLS and SpaceX's Falcon Heavy, with China's Long March 5 coming in just behind. After about 4 minutes into flight, the side boosters dropped off, and a minute or so later, we saw main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation and ignition of the upper stage RL-10 engine, and then fairing jettison. For us viewers, that's where the fun ended as the live stream was terminated, leaving the upper stage to carry the NRO satellite into geosynchronous orbit. The altitude of orbit is estimated to be over 20,000 miles up, requiring several burns of the RL-10 to achieve that position. The last flight of the Delta IV Heavy after 20 years of service is scheduled for early 2024 on another classified NROL mission, and this will see the entire Delta rocket family officially retired as ULA makes way for the less expensive Vulcan, which is also planned to outlift the Delta IV Heavy without the need for additional side boosters. 388 launches have taken place by a rocket named Delta since 1960, so it's been a very long ride indeed for this historic name as we count down to that final launch next year. Next, the European Space Agency have officially handed over the European service module for Artemis 2 to NASA. We first saw the ESM launch last year aboard Artemis 1, where it helped power the uncrewed Orion capsule around the moon. This time, the ESM will help to carry NASA astronauts Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Reid Wiseman, alongside Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen, on their 10-day trip to the moon and back for the first crewed mission to our closest neighbour in over 50 years. The European Service Module is responsible for control of the water, air, propulsion, temperature and electrical supply, with 33 thrusters, 11 kilometers of wiring, 4 propellant tanks, 2 pressure tanks and a single AJ-10-190 hypergolic engine, all working together to keep the spacecraft performing. Astronaut Victor Glover, the Artemis 2 pilot, was on hand to formally receive the European Service Module at Kennedy Space Center during signing by ESA's production manager Anthony Thurkettle and NASA's Orion program manager Howard Hu. Artemis 2 is still scheduled to launch in November 2024, and whilst the ESM undergoes further testing prior to integration with the Orion crew capsule before being mated with the SLS, the crew of astronauts have begun what will be 18 months of arduous training, where they'll learn all the required skills to operate the Orion spacecraft. You can follow along with their training through NASA's Web TV and Instagram channels. Now, speaking of astronauts, this past week, former UK Paralympian and orthopaedic and trauma surgeon John McFall has begun his training. John McFall arrived at the European Astronaut Centre in Cologne, Germany, where he will begin 2 years' worth of training as part of a feasibility study into accessibility in space travel. John will undertake astronaut training, including sea survival and hyperbaric testing, alongside assessing how facilities for astronauts can be made more accessible to open up the possibilities for astronauts with physical disabilities to live and work in space. John himself lost his right leg at an earlier age following a motorcycle accident. However, he bounced back to become a successful track sprinter, winning bronze in the T42 100 meters at the 2008 Beijing Paralympic Games. Thereafter becoming successful in the field of medicine, specialising in trauma and orthopaedic surgery. He's already had his first experience of weightlessness and will be crucial over the next 2 years in assessing how prosthetic limbs affect the ability to carry out astronaut duties in space. ESA is at the forefront of a programme to open space up for everyone, and whilst not guaranteed, if John is able to complete the training and the studies are positive, there may be an opportunity for him to fly to space on a future mission. Now, I mentioned in last week's video that Saxavord Spaceport released new images showing progress updates at the site. Of course, I also said that this doesn't happen, and when it does, it's often a very rare treat indeed. However, this past week I was doing some digging around and I found some new images showing yet more progress has been completed up at the site. These images are specifically of that rocket hall and integration facility, as well as Launchpad Fredo. I said last week that the steelworks were expected to start, and wouldn't you know, that's exactly what's happened as we take a look at these images. We can see the frame of the building is going up nicely, and we can also see more work around Launchpad Fredo. That to me looks like the first fuel tank is in place, and the foundation work is coming along for further structures next to the launch pad. We can also see from this image that the first water deluge pipework has been installed and is ready to be linked up via this trench here. A further trench comes in down the long side, running from the structure bases to the pad itself. No word on what this trench is for, but I would guess it will carry the main fuel lines and electrical supplies. That said, it might be a further offshoot for the deluge system itself with drainage works. The one thing we can say for sure about Saxavord is that they are really using the summer weather to move things along, with the first expected launch due later this year. Such as the anticipation that this launch is expected to generate, the team at Saxavord are planning to build a visitor centre and hotel on Unst, allowing guests to come and enjoy future launches in style. I know for sure that some of my Team Space Media Group colleagues will be there, and hopefully yours truly will also be along for the ride. So it would be really nice if there was dedicated facilities for us to stay, and even possibly a viewing platform to watch future launches from. And our thanks as ever go out to Frank and Debbie Strang, the owners of Saxavord Spaceport, not only for all the work they are doing to improve spaceflight in the UK, but also for considering people that like to come and watch rockets, from the media to tourists and just passing locals. Debbie and Frank Strang are now expecting the launch site operator's license to come through from the CAA within the next 8 weeks or so, and will continue full steam ahead to make sure all is ready for that first launch, expected by HyImpulse sometime around October this year. So another great week in spaceflight and a nice little progress update from Saxavord Spaceport. If you want to stay up to date with future space news, don't forget to subscribe and tick that notification bell so you don't miss future UK space news episodes. We really are growing here, so if you like this video, please do hit that like and feel free to share as well. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Tom June, and I'll see you next time.